Hello and welcome back to Media Snack, live from New York.
Greetings from London.
And I can see in our little dashboard here, it's very clever, that I think we're now streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch by the looks of things. I think that's the right thing. So wherever you're joining us from today, thank you very much from different places around the world. We get lots of lovely comments, appreciate those. Just a quick reminder right at the beginning, please subscribe to this channel. It's very helpful. And be alerted for future episodes. We've got a lot coming up, some really good stuff coming up. So please subscribe if you can, if you haven't already. Right, this week, but it's a continuing look for us at how media directors are repositioning media within their marketing org as a lever for growth and as a contributor to business growth. So if you know, over the years, we've spoken a bit about, media dollars sometimes being seen as a cost to the business, and the media director's role sometimes is, seen as spending money, perhaps without enough accountability. But increasingly, of course, media directors, and we talked a couple of weeks ago about the role of a media director, increasingly media directors want, obviously, to be more accountable, and their companies want media dollars to be more accountable for driving some form of business outcome. And when we talk about business outcome, we're not talking about engagement metrics or likes or click-throughs or anything like that. We're talking about how do media dollars drive growth for the business. And that's an amazing transformation that we're seeing happen in lots of businesses, which has been really exciting. The thing that we want to talk about today is what do you do during a pandemic? And we'll start maybe kind of at the far end of that, which is the agency relationship. We've got lots of advertisers have been asking in the last 12 months, taking an opportunity, as we've discussed, to really reflect on their own organization, really asking how they should be set up with their agencies to be most effective, how they be as kind of productive as possible. What should we do as the advertiser versus what should an agency do? Thinking ahead now, as there are more opportunities and tools available for the advertiser to have more control and more visibility over the way media dollars kind of flow through the supply chain. So it's a really good opportunity now, we think, for a media director, if you haven't done so in the last 12 months, to really start reflect on your own media operating model internally, and then also how that impacts your agency roster or the partners that you decide to partner with. So maybe we're going to start with thinking about the partners in the context of a 2021 market. So what's going on there in terms of the relationship between the advertiser and the agency?
So we know that this is going to be a fairly busy pitch market year because of all of the reasons we've talked about in the past and the pandemic last year. But what we're also finding is that many advertisers are taking the opportunity to pause and actually refresh and reflect on the relationship that they have with their agency. So rather than immediately defaulting to a competitive tendering process, which we know can be incredibly disruptive, can be incredibly expensive, can distract organizations completely. We find many brands now are beginning to think about actually re-looking at the relationship they have with their existing agency partners, because they don't want to go into a highly competitive marketplace. They perhaps have seen the value of their agency partnerships through the challenging times of the pandemic, and they're weighing up the rewards of going into a competitive tendering process with the challenges of doing that. So unless that relationship is beyond repair, is untenable, unless perhaps there is a statutory review that your corporate governance enforces you to follow, many advertisers are actually looking to refresh that relationship, buy themselves a little bit of time, improve the service and the terms of that relationship so that they can begin to look internally and start adapting their own operating model, with which then to use as a blueprint for a tendering process in the future. So that's kind of where we're seeing a number of advertisers beginning to travel down that path this year.
Yeah, exactly right. We think of some of the implications of that. Then the big one obviously is avoiding the pitch. Yeah, as you said, which is disruptive. And we still, we obviously run a lot of the major pitches, and we talk to a lot of advertisers when they're thinking about, either the need that they can identify to pitch. And I should add, as we always say, down below, we'll leave a link to what we say are the 6 and only 6 reasons to ever call an agency review. So just see if you kind of fall into one of those 6 buckets. And people come to us and they ask us, obviously, and our team about whether they should run a review. And they're nervous at the moment about not being able to do that face-to-face. Some companies are more confident in that than others. We've talked about some really good examples, and we've seen some amazing pitches being delivered kind of remotely in the last 12 months. But some companies are nervous about doing that, and then they're kind of saying, well, so what? So what then? What should we do? And that's the opportunity to go to sit down with the agency and just kind of think about the needs for the coming years ahead. When we speak to agency leadership, which we do a lot, obviously, in the nature of our work, obviously they're very keen to try and avoid the disruption of a pitch. Obviously, if they're the incumbent agency, they have to invest a huge amount, which is distracting for them. So there's a lot more desire to create this, private pitch or kind of off-market pitch, which is really just a refresh and a restatement of commitment on both sides.
Yeah.
Every single year, you do have to look at your scope of work with the agency, and that's important to do. But the part of this bigger transformation as media as a lever for growth, the implication on the agency relationship is often, if media is still being seen as a cost to the business, or you don't feel like you've really got the agency aligned to some common KPIs with you as the advertiser, this is an opportunity to do so, just to make some progress there. And I think you'll find that your agency is kind of open and willing to come to the table. It doesn't have to be a heavy duty negotiation, but there may be some tweaks that can be made in terms of scope, and maybe a payment model or incentive model that that incentivizes the right behaviors. And the right performance out of the agency. And you'll find probably a very willing participant, particularly from an incumbent agency who wants to avoid a pitch. So this is a good year to do that. It's a good year as well as we still having to kind of work remotely for a little bit more, to take some reflection on how then you operate as within your team. We've talked before that we've seen a trend of media teams within the advertisers growing. The general trend is that they're growing in capability over the last over recent years. So taking a little bit more control, having ownership of and visibility over more contracts, things like ad serving, some deciding to do their own media buying in certain places, for example. So the general trend is the advertising having a little bit more control, a bit more visibility over how things work. And so before you can be really clear with how you want to work with your agency, you do have to start thinking internally about how you want to be set up, what capabilities and resources you need, both in terms of headcount and technologies and access to certain data streams that you might have to pay for example. And that costs money. And so there's a business case to be made. So you have to do some kind of evaluation of your existing operation. We'll come on next week to talk a bit more about some ideas about how you should do, how you can begin to do that. But those are the big implications, I think, is just take the opportunity to reset and refresh. You've got a willing participant probably in your incumbent agency. And it does, the other big implication is just to start to think about your own internal operating model. So if you're going to if you want to sit down with your agency and kind of refresh that relationship this year, where do you start? What should they be thinking about?
It's actually not too dissimilar to a pitch process. The most important component of a pitch process is the preparation, getting all of the thinking, all of the alignment right. And it's the same with a negotiation or a refresh with your agency partners. You have to prepare properly. And being able to understand where the weaknesses are, perhaps within your current relationship, whether that's contractual or commercial or through a scope of work, understanding where the weak spots are is the perfect place to start. So once you understand where the weak spots are, then be very clear what the ask is. Be very clear what you're looking to get from your agency partner. If that's a contractual improvement, then use the ISBAR ANA framework as a yardstick for kind of best practice contracts in media. What are your commercial requirements? Are you going to be looking for slightly improved media pricing? So, you know, have a perspective on that. Scope of work, as you say, is absolutely critical. The pace of change that we go through in media, making sure that you have a relevant and up-to-date scope of work that not only delivers what you want your agency to deliver now, but also in 6 to 12 months' time. That's absolutely critical. And underpinning all of this is having a fair and equitable remuneration model. If you do not pay your agency properly, then sometimes the decisions that they make on your behalf won't necessarily be aligned with your objectives. So make sure your remuneration model rewards value generation and ensures absolute neutrality in the agency's thinking. So the preparation is absolutely critical. Once you've got the preparation, then frankly, obsess about the preparation of the briefing materials, because you want to make that as impressive and as impactful as possible. Also, because that will give you a ready-made pitch brief if you can't conclude the negotiation properly, right? If you cannot conclude that refresh in a way that you're happy with, then you've got to be able to pivot quickly into perhaps a more nuclear option, which would be a more competitive tendering process. So make sure that the materials are well documented, and then have a timeline. Have a timeline that you're aligned with, that your internal stakeholders are aligned with, that enables you to make progress quickly, not drawn out, but make progress quickly, and align that with the agencies. Make sure that they're happy with those timelines, that they can respond in a way that is according to your requirements, but within that timeline. And once you've concluded that refresh, then start again. See this as a new positive chapter within that relationship, and you know, build media for growth together. That's I think the brilliant opportunity now within this refresh kind of structure. You have an opportunity to re-engage with your agency partners, align them behind your strategic ambitions with media, and make them a partner for growth. And you know, good media leaders, marketing leaders within organizations see their agency partners as aligned stakeholders in a growth agenda.
Yeah. And that's where it works. When we see the advertiser and agency relationships really thrive. Yeah. It sounds so easy. I know we've been saying it for 10 years or more. You know, kind of align objectives with your agency. It sounds much easier said than done. But it's worth taking the time to do that. And I know, David, you went through some really good steps there. You know, if you're a media director, you might want to go back and just kind of listen to that a bit slower. But if you want a cheat sheet on this, if you can download, we have a workbook called Media for Growth Workbook. Oh, look, here we go. There's the URL. I was just about to ask you if you put the URL up. So if you go to idcoms.com/growth, you can download a little work plan, actually, which is quite helpful. We find advertisers to work through themselves, or you can reach out to us or one of the ID Comms team who can talk you through some of the ways that we approach that resetting or refreshing of the relationship, and do it in a way that's actually very energizing for your agency partner as well. It shouldn't feel like an onerous negotiation, obviously, because you should be building together. Okay, very good. So next week we're going to come on to talk about how you can reflect on your own internal operating model as a media director and some of the things that you can do there. Again, you'll find that in the toolkit. So if you want to read ahead, do some homework and get ready for next week. Please keep the comments and questions coming. Really appreciate those. Thank you for joining us. But that is it, I think, for this week.
Yeah. See you next time.